It's not personal. It's strictly business.
Is there any film in the cinematic pantheon that is more immortalised than Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather? It's the definition of a classic, and the film's classicism makes us perceive it even more in that framework.
Look how they massacred my boy.
So it's difficult to look back to the New Hollywood era when the film was first released and see what was so new about it. Although the psychedelic aesthetic of a film like Easy Rider, with its drugged-out, anti-conformist hippies, may more obviously represent New Hollywood, The Godfather remains a major staple of that era. A boldly fresh take on a classic studio genre. This video is brought to you by Mubi. Get 1 month free at mubi.com/thediscardedimage. At a time when cinema going in America was in crisis, young directors were given the opportunity to make bolder films to try and attract audiences. Many filmmakers of this new era combined the tropes and styles of old Hollywood genre films and merged them with the innovations they were witnessing in the art cinema of the rest of the world.
The power of Christ compels you!
An obvious example in the crime genre would be Bonnie and Clyde, which recalls lovers on the run movies like Gun Crazy, but is also clearly influenced by the French New Wave, which itself had been riffing on these genres. The visual style of The Godfather seems more indebted to a less visceral approach that nevertheless was innovative. Coppola was inspired by Italian directors, like Luchino Visconti, who started in neorealism after World War II and later evolved towards a more lyrical, operatic style. Bernardo Bertolucci's The Conformist is perhaps the biggest influence. Coppola chose cinematographer Gordon Willis, who had been nicknamed the Prince of Darkness, to take care of The Godfather's visual aesthetic, and asked him to recreate the oppressive mood that Bertolucci's cinematographer Vittorio Storaro was the expert of. As a genre piece, The Godfather pays homage to and reinvents the classic gangster films of the 1930s. Those films depicted the gangster as a wild, brash, and unhinged individual, acting completely outside of normal civilized society.
Get out of my way, Johnny! I'm gonna spit!
These bad boys were living a fast-paced life of vice, and with old Hollywood being a very moralistic era, a film couldn't be seen to give the wrong message. A price was always paid at the end. Coppola's take on the genre aimed for greater authenticity. But after films like Goodfellas, which took a more journalistic approach to mob material, The Godfather's realism may not feel as convincing today. Still, the way it approached the gangster milieu was new, starting with the actors. If the film tells of a transition between the old generation and the new, on a meta level, that shift is also present in the casting. Marlon Brando was one of the original forefathers of method acting, passing the torch to the young Al Pacino, who was to become one of its main inheritors and modernizers during that era. New Hollywood also meant more complex characterizations. In The Godfather, we are asked to sympathize with murderers. This is made easier by the fact that we only catch glimpses of regular civilian life, which acclimatizes us to their world, especially when their rivals seem more vicious and more like the typical gangsters of old. We also understand the Corleone's plight. The film starts highlighting how an immigrant trying to live the American life can't do so because of prejudice in the system.
She kept her honor, so they beat her like an animal. They went free that very day.
The family resorts to criminality because they feel it's the only way for them to achieve power and therefore security. They're not mindless killers.
Some are reliable people that aren't going to be carried away. I mean, we're not murderers, in spite of what this Undertaker said.
Don Vito is sympathetic in his striving to make his enterprise legitimate. The whole reason the conflict between families starts is because the patriarch believes drug trafficking will taint his image.
It's true. I have a lot of friends in politics. But they wouldn't be friendly very long if they knew my business was drugs instead of gambling, which they regard as a harmless vice. But drugs is a dirty business.
Perhaps it is also his naivety that makes him likable and touching. There's no chance his enterprise could get clean. The well is already poisoned. It's this duality at the family's heart that makes The Godfather richer and more modern than the gangster films of the 30s. And Coppola highlights this more humane and tragic aspect from the opening sequence. There's the joyous celebration of family on the one hand, which is everything Vito has worked towards, why he does what he does. And it's contrasted with the shadowy interiors of his office, where he makes the murderous decisions that help sustain this lifestyle. From this primal, dark core underneath the sweet veneer, Vito peers through the blinds. He's trapped between these two worlds, missing his daughter's wedding because of his obligations.
That's my family, Kay. It's not me.
This dichotomy becomes Michael's too. And it's seeing him progressively get sucked into this world he despises that makes the film surprisingly heartbreaking. Unlike the gangster of old, who jumps at the occasion to do crimes for cash, Michael's turn has a cruel, yet understandable, almost natural progression. This shot at the hospital seems to represent a split in his psyche, between his individual wants and desires and his primordial commitment to the family, his fear and his resolve.
You know my father. The men are coming here to kill him. You understand?
He's working on instinct to protect his father, and compared to the person that turns up to help, is calm and collected. He's built for this world. He has to step in because Sonny is too hot-headed and Fredo is too weak.
Don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
He's the only one that has the same balance and the same division inside of him as the Don. And this is the tragedy of the film.
Your last chance, Rico. Are you coming out or do you want to be carried out?
In the typical gangster movie, the hoodlum pays for his crimes with his life. Since this is new Hollywood, Coppola doesn't need to conform to that tradition. Yet he still honors it somewhat. Instead of dying a physical death, Michael dies a spiritual one.
Michael, do you believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth?
I do.
This is most dramatically illustrated by this sequence, where we see him christening his sister's baby whilst massacring the rival families.
Do you renounce Satan?
Coppola is using cross-cutting montage to really drive this home, but it's not some kind of great revelation. It's just a more exaggerated form of what these gangsters have been doing this whole time. It's the wedding again.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Coppola's reframing of the gangster trope makes it more relatable. We don't need to be a gangster to relate to Michael, and we're not experiencing him as some other. Rather than a stereotypical mad criminal, he is simply a man who, instead of following his own path, finds himself drawn into following his family's footsteps by necessity. And his novel approach to the business echoes Coppola's bold take on one of the oldest movie genres. Just as Michael brings the Corleones into the future, Coppola bridges the generation gap between older filmgoers and the younger generation hungry for a new and more irreverent kind of entertainment. If Coppola maintains the fatalism of the gangster film, it's to give it more resonance. Its significance and its effects are multiplied by our affection for Michael. Even though his demise feels inevitable, we still identify with his struggle against it. As I mentioned in the video, Francis Ford Coppola was highly influenced by Italian cinema during the making of The Godfather. And if you want to check some of those films out, you can head over to Mubi, this video's sponsor. Over in the US, they're showing Bernardo Bertolucci's The Conformist, which is in the running for the best designed film of all time, and a great look into the Mussolini fascist mindset. And here in the UK, they're showing Luchino Visconti's Rocco and His Brothers, a lush black and white epic which has a similar family dynamic between brothers as Coppola's film. I actually saw it for the first time this month, and it's the best thing I've watched so far in 2021. Every day, Mubi premieres a new film, from timeless classics to cult favourites and acclaimed masterpieces. It's like your own personal film festival. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/thediscardedimage and get a whole month of great cinema for free.